Hey everyone, and welcome to another new episode of Time Extend. My name is Adam Ismail, and as always, I'm joined today with
Brendan Norrison, and today we're taking a step back from all the hectic episodes we've had and delivering the next episode of Free Practice. So I think this has been well earned, Adam. We've been pretty damn busy on the Time Extend front recently.
We've had so many great shows, and there's so much going on. We've talked to so many awesome people, and I'm really enjoying it. But at the same time, I just felt like I kind of needed an episode just to shoot the shit and sound dumb and just like get all of these thoughts in my head out, even if they're not really fully formed. And Free Practice is great for those purposes.
Yeah, for sure. It's pretty much our dumping ground for random bits of chat, and we've even come up with a nice little topic idea to make these episodes give us something to talk about at first, at least. So we went on Twitter and polled our audience for some questions.
Yeah, we have. So this is really the perfect show. You know, I know a lot of people like to listen to podcasts in your car. If you're not in your car, kick back, grab a drink, grab a beer, get some wine, just relax. I would be doing that, but it's 8:30 in the morning where I am. It's a little too early to start day drinking. But Brendan, by all means, you should have a cold one in your hand right now.
Oh yeah, always, mate. I'm never not drinking. That sounds a bit troublesome.
I think it's just the way it goes these days. I should also apologize because on my end you might hear some less than desirable audio quality because I'm not in my usual recording situation. But yeah, I don't know. Luckily it's a free practice, so I feel like being kind of half of a shit show is sort of the name of the game.
Yeah. We're good.
Right. Yeah, so let's just go through some of these questions. We asked people on Twitter if they had anything they wanted to ask us, and we actually got a pretty good response. 5 or 6 people responding back. So thank you everybody who asked us stuff. And I mean, you know, we polled. We probably could have like polled Twitter earlier and maybe gotten more people in on it, because this was just like 2 days before we ended up recording. But if you ever have any questions at any time, reach out to us and we might just talk about it on the show, especially if it fits a certain topic.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the thing is, if people are listening to the podcast, they know exactly the type of stuff we love talking about, so the more questions the merrier.
Yeah, to get started, I guess, jumping off the previous podcast we had about Wipeout, we got a question from Andrew. I guess this is a weird one to start off with because he's definitely trolling us. He wants us to argue for 3 hours minimum about what all the Wipeout teams, all 20 F1 grid drivers would drive for. He thinks Kimi is a Haramau man. Yeah, I don't even know what to do with this question.
Yeah, that's a 3-part episode series alone. So what I will say, Andrew, is we probably won't answer every single driver, but if I can think of 3 off the top of my head, I'd say Hamilton would probably be Icarus if we're talking HD Fury era. Fastest ship, most talented pilots according to the lore anyway when it comes to Icarus. Faisal would be, for me, I would have said Vettel before he really started shitting the bed the past season or so in terms of consistency. So we'll go Vettel right up until last year, basically. Thought he was consistent enough, good drive, did the job. Maybe if we're looking at previous F1 drivers as well, like Paul Di Resta or something, somebody who can consistently bring in the laps, but when it comes to racing ability, has been faltering a bit recently. And then third for me, Charles Leclerc, AG Systems, because AG Systems are always the up and rising team, and he seems to be one of the most exciting drivers on the grid right now that doesn't have a tendency to try and punch other drivers. Sorry, Max.
Well, here's my issue with this question, because I know a lot about like Ridge Racer team lore, but I don't know that much about like which teams in Wipeout are supposed to be good and which ones aren't. Like, I have no concept of it. I know that, you know, Icarus has the best craft usually, and before that Piranha had one that was, you know, balanced. It was pretty unbalanced. It was mostly like focused on speed, but oftentimes that would be the best if you could pilot it properly. So like I don't like which teams are supposed to be like the perennial, like the Ferraris, the McLarens of Wipeout, and then which teams are like, I don't know, like Haas or whatever, that just kind of show up out of nowhere and attract unsavory sponsors.
Tigron. They're in so little of the games, then they randomly appear in a Mega Collection again. It's like they're one of those teams that just randomly gets new sponsorship deals and somehow stays afloat.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in that case, I would just give them Haas's drivers, like without even thinking. Although Andrew does say Grosjean has that Assegai energy, and Nico might accidentally wind up stuck in a 10-year contract at Goteki 45. I hope not. The other problem with Wipeout is that there's too many teams. I think they got to a point where there were just way too many teams. Like they should have stopped at like the teams that were in Wipeout 3 should have been the only teams in Wipeout for the rest of the time.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say. Especially when, like you're saying, it isn't as if the lore's incredibly in depth for each of the teams anyway. So another random team pops up, it's just like, what purpose do they serve except from being a slightly worse Piranha or a slightly worse Faizar or something like that?
Well, here's the thing. I do remember reading when we were doing our Wipeout shows. I was on Wipeout Zone, which is such a great website, and I was in the wiki and I was reading about Piranha, and there were like 8 paragraphs about the history of Piranha. So there is lore to these teams. It's just that unless you seek it out, you wouldn't really know about it. Like Ridge Racer 4 makes it very clear when you're picking your team, like Solvalu's like the team with the most championships, and PRC is new, and Dig Racing team used to be good but now sucks, and like they make those things clear. But like in Wipeout, you have to go seek it out. It's not necessarily made aware to you.
I guess it works well for the game because it means that you don't have to get bogged down with all this information, but it would be cool to throw them in the loading screens and stuff in some of the games. Yeah,
I would appreciate it. But of course, we have to mention, Brendan, as we talk about the Pack Racing Club, that we have this awesome commissioned new header on our Twitter page, which some of you who ask questions may have seen at this point. It is Brendan and I as drivers for the PRC, which also, funnily enough, is the exact same initials as the People's Republic of China, and now I can't kind of unlink those in my head. But no, we are in front of a... What is that? That's a Tarazi Troop, I want to say.
Yeah.
The red and yellow one on the cover of the Ridge Racer 4 box, and it looks awesome, and it was made by Haley Mulch, who's an illustrator, comic artist. She's really into F1 and racing in general. Really, really cool stuff, and we could not be more thankful to her for doing it. So props for that. It looks awesome.
Yeah, it looks fantastic, and it's the first piece of art we've had outside of the album covers that you do as well, Adam, about the podcast, and Haley's done a fantastic job. We absolutely love it, and that's why it went straight onto the Twitter banner. It's really kind of surreal to see us as drivers as well for PRC, given how much we love Ridge Racer Type 4.
I know, it's very weird but awesome. I've never had any commissioned work done of me ever, and like me in those overalls is just like so cool to see. Like really can't thank Haley enough. Go follow her on Twitter. She's at Haley Mulch, which is HAYLEYMULCH. There's a lot of really cool F1 stuff. So yeah, definitely check that out.
Yeah, and keep that name in your head as well, because there might be potential to have her on the podcast. Those discussions are kind of ongoing at the moment, so another guest to add to the list, Adam. That's
awesome. I hope she doesn't hate Wipeout 2048. Anyway. Oh, God. Alright, so very, very cool. I gotta go back a couple pages to get back to this, the questions that people are asking. Alright, so we also got a question from Fernando Moutinho, who is one of the guys who's always responding to stuff, friend of the show, always with good questions. Although Fernando's asking us if we could talk about F1 esports, which is a bit of a problem because I don't really follow F1 esports.
No, me either.
But I did a little bit of research into the way it's organized, and it sounds really cool. So basically they have, at least, I think the video I watched is from F1 2018, when they did it that time, but it's like they have like 3 qualifying events in the beginning of the year, and they mirror like actual races, so it's like the weekend of Melbourne, and then the weekend of, I don't know, whatever comes after, was that Shanghai, and then
Sure.
and I don't remember, and then Baku, and then during those weekends they have online events on each console where everyone competes, and you get the best time or whatever, and the top 6 finishers of those events on each platform basically go to this like global playoff, you could say, where they're then racing each other again. They all meet in one place, and they all have their, the whole like dedicated rigs and everything. And then out of the performances there, the teams in F1 actually have their own esports, side teams, contingents, whatever, and they draft the drivers based on the results of that playoff. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, that's really good idea, to be honest. Keeps it fresh as well, so that one team can't just nab the fastest driver every time. And it's a system that seems to work well in American sports as well when it comes to choosing up young uprising stars, so it's good to see that influence there as well.
Yeah, it's not that different in concept from like the whole GT Sport FIA. You're driving like the Manufacturers Cup. You're driving for a certain manufacturer, but the thing about that is, of course, the manufacturers don't have any direct involvement. You just pick the car you want to drive, basically, and you represent that manufacturer, right? So, like, it's not like you're working. It's not like if you're the Porsche driver in GT Sport in the FIA Championships, you're really having contact with Porsche. I don't think it works that way. But this is really, really cool, and I've seen. I haven't really watched any F1 esports, but it's nothing against F1 esports in particular. It's just like I really should get into esports because everyone I know now has something they love. Brendan, I know you're a big Rocket League fan, and you actually competed recently, right?
Yeah, I did actually. There was the Scottish National Esports League finals held at a reasonably sized exhibition centre. Me and my team made that. We suffered a crushing defeat, but the team that we got beat off of went on to make the finals, and it was a fun event, to be honest. I've never actually had any involvement in esports, and it was exciting to be part of that as well. So yeah, I'm a pretty big esports Rocket League fan, as you say. Properly into the Championship Series, which is like the premier event, much like FIA's GT Sport Championships. And I think with esports, like you're saying, once you find something that you like, you can get properly into it. There's no obligation to care about other stuff. Like, I have no clue how like League of Legends esports work, or Overwatch League, which seems to run forever. Like, every single week it seems like those guys are competing. Like, I'm just properly into the Rocket League side of things, and the good thing about that is because it's like a premier series with, say, like 12 teams at the top, you do hear about all the transfer rumours and stuff, and it's weird to think that's where esports are at now. Like, player transfers are a thing. Like, there's that much money in it now. It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, even just the fact that, like, in F1, the teams are operating things, and you go on Twitter or social media, and the esports teams of those teams have their own like social media accounts, and it's crazy how much it's growing. It's really cool to see. I mean, like, this actually ties into another question we're going to talk about later from Sweet Jones, the Skinny Rage on Twitter, who was asking us if we participate in GT Sport FIA races. And like, personally, I don't really participate in any racing esports just because I feel like I'm not good enough. I could try, but I mean, like, it also depends on the game. Like, in the case of Dirt Rally 2.0, I tried doing some of the community events, and I just got so slaughtered, like 15-20 seconds too slow on like a 6 or 7 minute stage, that I'm just like, forget it. And with those, it's like you get one shot, and if you screw it up, you can't do it again or something. So yeah, I tend to keep away from those things just because, like, I like racing against my friends, I like racing online to an extent, but I wouldn't say it's very competitive for me. It's not a competitive thing because I'm just not good enough to be that competitive.
Yeah, and I'm pretty much in the same boat, Adam. I don't compete in these races purely because I just don't feel fast enough. The thing is, I'm pretty sure you're probably in the same boat. When you used to play racing games with like, people you knew round about your neighbourhood or family members or whatever, you always felt as if you were like on another level of skill.
Right.
Like, nobody could match how good you were, and that's why when online play started, naturally you would be like, oh, it's time to prove to everybody how great I am, not realising that 95% of people online had the same idea. So it was one of those things where I genuinely thought I was pretty good at Sims, like Gran Turismo, and then when you actually race the guys who are just so good at it, it's just mind-blowing, and that kind of eliminates the competitive side for me, because it isn't a case of putting in enough practice to get good. I've just accepted that I just don't have the correct mindset these guys have for extracting milliseconds per lap. I think I've referenced before, but like especially qualifying is something that I'm just absolutely terrible at. I just don't know what it is. Like when I'm in a race, I can overtake the people who finish above me. Usually in GT Sports races, I'll overtake like 6 people during the course of a race. But when it comes to those qualifying paces, like I'm always at the bottom. It's just one of those weird things I just can't wrap my head around, and that's an example of why when it comes to these hyper organised esports races, I'm not the type of person that can compete in those.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point about GT Sport, because I don't know why I'm usually always in the lower split of whatever category I'm in. Like, if I'm in a given category, I figure sometimes I should be near the top sometimes, but like I'm always in the lower end of the split, so I'm always starting like 10th or something out of like 16 or 12th or... Yeah, I mean, like, I enjoy the races I get placed into in GT Sport usually when I'm doing a sport race, and the other part of the previous question, you know, is basically asking us how we feel about GT Sports ranking system, and as long as you're on that subject, I mean, it's not something I really think about. I feel like the issue people tend to have in those cases is with the penalty system more than anything else.
Yeah, for sure. GT Sport does do a great job at managing a sportsmanship and driver rating. And it's one of these hard things to measure, because as somebody who's terrible at qualifying, I do critique how it basically just nullifies any progress I make if I'm bad at qualifying, because if I finish like 11th in qualifying and even make my way up to 8th, the game still sees that as a pretty poor performance, from what I can tell anyway. So I don't get many points for that, and I'm not saying I should. It's just an example of I understand the ranking system is great for people who can be good at both of those elements of racing. It just feels like because I absolutely suck at qualifying that my rank is like permanently stuck on B and 3/4. It's like just getting to that A mark, but I just can't nail qualifying enough. And then on the sportsmanship rating, it's always going to be a tough line to walk, but I think out of all the games, GT Sport does it pretty damn well. When I played the beta, when it first came out, it was really odd seeing an online racer where there wasn't one person trying to cause absolute havoc. Now, what's happened over time in GT Sports case is that there are people who've become masters of the dark arts, so to speak, in the sense that you'll always see the guys who are slightly budging people offline or darting in and out of the racing line to try and throw people off physically, but then the person who bumps into them gets the penalty. And you see that kind of thing happening more and more, and I've even seen some of the pros complain about that at an FIA level, which isn't optimal. But let's be honest, like managing, or rather tracking players' car movements is not something that can be done unless there's a real spotter. Like the game would be an absolute be all over the place basically if Polyphony tried to implement a system that looked at how people were following driving lines and stuff. I can just imagine that getting way out of hand.
Yeah, I don't think it's something they could ever fully fix without the involvement of like an actual steward. You know, it's not going to work. I've seen questions, people wondering if like Polyphony could utilize AI or some aspect of AI to like make these decisions, and
it's diminishing
Kaz
returns.
responded, maybe like a GT Plan interview or something like that, and Kaz was just like, "We are so far away from being able to do that. Like that's I mean, great in theory, but how do you do that today?" So yeah, I don't know if there's any solution. I mean, it is funny because anytime I talk to people about like GT Sports penalty system, they're often saying like, you know, they somehow found a way to make it worse. Like every update makes it worse, and I don't know if that's true. I think it might just be like you get used to the way a penalty system is, and then like they change it, so now you have to relearn the rules. But relearning the rules basically keeps everyone on their toes. I think that's why it gets changed so much, because I mean they want to obviously like force people to you know, they want to refine the penalty system so that it punishes the right things and doesn't punish people who have been punished by our drivers themselves, and you know, doles out repercussions responsibly. But I think also just by changing it as often as they do, they just make you kind of be like, you know what, just maybe I'll just stay on the track and not chance it, because I don't know what it's going to do this time if I go off track, and if I drop 3 wheels or something like that and I lose time and yet still I get a penalty because I was on the inside or something.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I can tell, the last penalty system they implemented was like it was like anti-DRS zones. So they'd kind of nominated a part of the track where you serve your penalty. I think that's the way it was when I raced last, when the Goodwood track came out. And like I wasn't aware that was the case. So for like half of the lap before, I kept slowing down trying to serve my penalty and nothing was happening. It just dropped like 4 places beforehand, and I was like, well, I probably should have looked into that before racing. But the thing is, like, GT Sport was such a risk when it came out because it's prioritising the online racing, and the fact that it seems to be a resounding positive now, the online racing element of the game, that's good for Polyphony. Like, they implemented a system that obviously does have its kinks and annoyances, such as the penalty system stuff, how penalties are dished out, but it doesn't seem to harm the longevity of the game because there's still a dedicated community of players there, and not just at the top level. Like, we're talking across the board. You can find races in pretty much any race category fairly easy on the game still, and that's a far cry from the initial reaction of the game that everybody spelled doom and gloom for the series because it was ditching its roots. We've heard through the grapevine that GT7 will try and incorporate sport rather than make that the focus, and I think that will be good for everybody.
Yeah, it would. I mean, I'm surprised that, you know, in their first time out they did it pretty well. Personally, I'm also always on that cusp of being A, I feel like, but not quite making it, so I'm stuck at B level. But I mean, the drivers that I encounter usually always pretty, like, it has fostered this community of drivers that like actually is quite sportsmanlike. You know, they don't do things that make them look bad, as Tom says in the beginning of the game when you start. So yeah, it's worked out well, and I'm excited for a GT7 that potentially just makes sport a factor in a larger traditional Gran Turismo experience, because I tend to play these games for you know, in a single player context for the most part, but still, I mean, no issues with it.
No, none here either. I think it's doing as great a job as it can at this point in time, and Polyphony are just going to keep improving it into the next game, I think.
So with that, should go to another question. I love this one. It's from Ben Fact. As I really want to hear a conversation about Vanishing Point and Test Drive Overdrive. And I love this question because for whatever reason, like, I don't know, like 6 months ago, I played Vanishing Point for like 5 hours one day. Like, I just, like, on the Dreamcast. I think it's because I discovered that I had a copy of Vanishing Point when I thought I had sold the game, so I just played it for forever. And I don't usually like, when I go back and play old games, I usually play games I like. I usually don't play Vanishing Point, which should tell you something about my feelings about Vanishing Point. But before I get into it, Brendan, have you played either of these games?
Yeah, so Vanishing Point, I distinctly remember playing this quite a lot purely because I just returned from like a holiday away with my family to Spain, and for whatever reason I bought Vanishing Point in the airport on the way home.
Oh my god.
And like I got home and like I just for like a week I played it, convinced that I would start to like it at some point. But it's not a bad game by any means. It's just it's one of these ones I think some people will absolutely have great memories about it, and that's why it sticks in their head. Not too dissimilar to what I've just said. but I don't think that anybody would reference it as a glowing point of the genre. Test Drive, Overdrive, I haven't played, but I distinctly remember seeing it in stores because of that Brotherhood of Speed tagline, which is just like so early 2000s it hurts.
Absolutely, yeah. So Vanishing Point, I don't hate the game. The first time I played it, I really didn't like it. I remember must have rented the game back in like 2000 or whenever it came out, and I didn't like it back then. You know, I was obviously very young. When I got my Dreamcast, like when I got not a used, but like when I got a Dreamcast off eBay, you know, it was new, but this was like 2009, so a lot later on. Vanishing Point was one of the first games I picked up, just because you could find it pretty cheaply, and it was a racing game that I wanted to give another shot. And it's strange because it's like very... I've never played a game like this before that's focused so much around like stunt driving, but isn't necessarily like, it's not Stuntman. You know, you're not doing like missions to like... I mean, there are challenges where you're trying to like do this jump, or like there's like these figure eights that you're trying to do like a barrel roll and complete the figure eight in a certain amount of time. There are stunt challenges like that, but they're not, you know, it's not like you're in a movie and you're a stuntman, for example. And it's the closest thing I can liken it to, it was almost like Acclaim, I think the developer was Clockwork, and I don't remember anything else they worked on, but like Clockwork is almost like they played Crazy Taxi's challenges, and they were like, we're going to make a game. Yeah, we're going to make a game based around, which like Crazy Taxi's challenges are excellent. But the issue I have with Vanishing Point is that the physics are a little too floaty and inconsistent, and it's like you're driving a car that's also in water. Like, it's really... I've never played a game like this before. It's like they really wanted to play up the body roll and the weight transfer, which is usually something I like. You get that kind of push and pull, that tension when you're driving the car. But in Vanishing Point, it just ends up making you always feel skittish and unsure, which is, I think, my issue with the game. But... that said, there is like a racing component too. Like there's a mode where it's really weird because it's like you start in like 60th place or something like that, and you have to get your way. You have to get as high up as you can. But it's almost like Need for Speed The Run, except for the fact that like you're not actually driving against 60-yard cars at any given time. The game just loads 4 of them in front of you, and you pass those 4, and there are 4. So it's not like you have 60-car grids. But it's like this weird cross between. You know, The Run and like Tokyo Extreme Racer. That aspect of the game I don't find as interesting, but just the whole existence of Vanishing Point I think is really weird, because like it came out of nowhere, and I remember it was very, very like prominently, heavily advertised, at least like in magazines and stuff in the US. It was all over the place, but I think it bombed.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't ever get a sequel, and what you were saying about it being advertised heavily, some quotes off of the back of the box, I quite like bringing these up because they tend to be a good laugh. Games Master says that it had the most realistic handling yet seen in a racing game. The selection of cars is truly outstanding. I mean, the thing about the selection of cars point is that there were some... It's actually pretty amazing. That I really like.
Yeah, it's actually like my favorite thing about the game, because they're like the regular cars where you have like, you know, you get your Audi TT and your Mustang and one Supra stuff from the day, but then they have secret cars, and the secret cars are like 1996 Mercury Cougar, like shit that you would only see today in like a junkyard somewhere in the States. And it's like I love that these awful horrible like body on frame Fords are like in this game for some reason. It's I don't know, I just think it's really funny.
I'm pretty sure there's a Camry in there as well.
Probably a Camry. Yeah, the secret cars, I have to look up now a list of the secret cars in Vanishing Point, because it's absolutely ridiculous. So did you like? So what were your feelings on the game then? As I looked these up, did you like? Were you happy with it, or do you just remember it as that thing you just picked up on a whim in an airport?
Yeah, I mean the crazy box or vanishing box, whatever the hell they call it, challenges were probably the thing I remember most. I remember the track design being not too bad as well. Everything about the game I felt was really well made and fun, but I felt as if the handling engine almost tried to like nullify that, because I wouldn't quite say it was realistic, as Games Master have proudly proclaimed in that quote. But I would say that they definitely tried to give a bit of weight and complexity, essentially, so that it wasn't just like any other arcade racing game. You did have to try and learn how the cars handled in that game specifically, much like you would in a sim. But the game also tried its hardest to be like a kind of off-the-cuff arcade racer you could have fun with, so I felt as if the handling engine was almost at odds with the attitude of the rest of the game.
It was supposed to be, to me it felt like this game very much wanted you to have fun, but also like, no, you need to really get in tune with these cars to the point where they're doing things you don't want them to, and you need to rein them in, and you need to really understand them. And it did kind of seem contradictory, because it wasn't a game, in spite of the way it may have looked, it was not a game you could just jump into and have a good time. You really had to work at it. Once I did work at it, I enjoyed it more. But yeah, I did find the list of these secret cars, and among the secret cars there's a Ford Taurus from '94, a Ford Ranger truck, 1964 Ford Thunderbird. They really had a lot of Fords in this game, and the Ford Windstar, which is a minivan. Lincoln Town Car, Mercury Sable Wagon, I think was my favorite, because it's definitely like the saddest car out of all of them. Because just the Fords and Mercuries from that time period were so terrible. There was one more. Oh, there's a Volkswagen Microbus, 1971. So, yeah, some funny cars in this game.
And to be honest, that's what makes it stand out for me, those secret cars. Obviously, like you're saying, the Audi TT and stuff were in there, but it was those secret cars that really gave the game a bit of personality, I suppose.
Yeah, it's just a fun thing to revisit every now and then. It's not one of my favorite racing games, but on the Dreamcast, the Dreamcast, as we've devoted the whole series to, has such a eclectic mix, one might say, of racing games. It has a lot of racing games, and they're all very different. And Vanishing Point's kind of, it definitely plays a role in that. And I can definitely say more about it than Test Drive Overdrive, which, God, I played that once, probably in like 2002 or 2003, whenever it came out, and never touched it again. And at first I didn't know what it was, because I didn't realize that this was just Test Drive in the US. Had a totally different cover. It did not say Brotherhood of Speed. It just had like this weird like Dodge Charger doing a wheelie on the cover, and then like Test Drive in graffiti text. So they were definitely going for like the Need for Speed Underground, Street Racing Syndicate. They were trying to win over those fans, but this was like the last. I'm pretty sure this was like the last traditional Test Drive like game in the series. I think the series kind of died here.
Oh wow!
So
that's grim. Like I said, I've never played it. I've seen of it, but never actually played it myself. So the thoughts are fairly limited here.
Test Drive is a very, very strange series. I mean, well, we talked about Test Drive Le Mans, and I'm not even necessarily including that, because that's not really Test Drive the same way that, Test Drive V Rally isn't. The Test Drive brand was kind of extended from Infogrames to all of these different properties, depending on what they thought was most marketable. But Test Drive is like the core series, which I look at as like the games that were developed by Pitbull Syndicate. So like, there were a lot of them on like the on the PlayStation 1. I think it was like 4 or 5. 6 was on the Dreamcast. 6 was probably on PlayStation 1 as well. And then this, Test Drive Overdrive. I never quite understood why people bought these games or why they were successful, because they always seemed really of questionable quality. Like, maybe Overdrive's actually better. I mean, like, I'm looking at screenshots of it, and it looks like it might be better than the previous entries, but, like, God, I remember I had Test Drive 5 on the PS1. I got it as a gift, and I'm just like, this is... It's definitely like the ugliest racing game I've ever played. Because like all the car models are so off. Like I've never played a game that were just like, yeah, if you like squint your eyes and maybe look at a corner of it that maybe looks like a Dodge Viper, but otherwise it just looks like some grotesque melty thingy. And the track design's weird. It always seemed like discount Need for Speed. Like, if I wanted the worst Need for Speed and to also spend less money, I would find Test Drive probably in the discount bin at a given GameStop or EB Games. So.
And I guess that's why Test Drive also died out, because now if you want a subpar Need for Speed experience, you can just buy the real thing. So,
I love the shade. I love the shade. Yeah. I'm looking at like Metacritic for Test Drive Overdrive, and the PS2 and Xbox One's got 73, 71 out of 100, which definitely ties into something that we've been talking about lately, which is that we want to do a series on 7 out of 10 racers. Yes. Both of these games seem like they are perfect for the 7 out of 10 racers discussion, but I also don't know if I'm going to revisit these specifically, so this might actually be like the backdoor pilot for 7 out of 10 racers, because I'll probably never play these games again.
Yeah, I know. I mean that's the beauty of the series, I suppose. It's trying to force each other to at least give it a go. It'll be interesting to see how we set about that series, because it'd be good, for example, if one person has a 7 out of 10 racer and they love it for whatever reason, and then try to convince the other person why it's even worth bringing up. So it's like, why are you talking about penny racers, Brendan? And I'd be like, oh, X, Y, and Z. So like, I think that could be a cool way to bounce off of each other.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I'd much rather go and find the copy of Test Drive Overdrive than play Penny Racers, because you've been trying to convince me of this for a long time, and I look at screenshots of them, I'm just like, I just don't think that that's something I would have fun with. Shocks definitely, but for you, I think Shocks isn't 7 out of 10. Shocks is probably like probably perfect score.
11 out of 10.
Yeah, exactly.
Shocks is so good that they basically killed EA Sports Big. That was their final crescendo.
Right. I don't want to bring it all the way back to Test Drive, but I have to say I have the Wikipedia entry for this game up on my screen right now, and I'm so engrossed by the story. Did you know that you took control of a character named Dennis Black, a San Franciscan street racer who races an exclusive street racing club on behalf of another street racer named Donald Clark, who was injured during a race?
Oh no!
They're so organized, the street racers. Like, oh, like you're injured, I'll like sub in for you. I'll be your alternate.
I've also I've looked up the the game case, and on the back it says, as you've just said, you're Dennis Black, independent street racer, and you've been asked to prove yourself. A cardinal invite to prove yourself on the street racing illegal scene.
That come in like a nice envelope with the heart sticker on it, and just like, you've been cordially invited.
Yeah, I mean that's it. Apparently, there's 16 opponents who get in your head and will do anything to win, as well. So,
well, I mean, as any opponent should. So I guess at a certain point, Dennis Black wins against a driver. I don't know. I guess an important one. I'm just jumping.
Does it not say his name?
I mean, who is it? He's trying to beat one of the club's most ruthless racers. So no, Wikipedia does not say the name of this driver. Well, the rumors are proven true, and Clark. I'm getting all the names. They couldn't have picked up like. They couldn't have chosen more different names than Donald Clark and Dennis Black. I mean, they're interchangeable. Anyway, at the end of the game, the two protagonists, I guess, Black and Clark, race for the custody of a Dodge Viper. And at the end of the game, you win the Viper, if you beat the game. However, it is later revealed that Clark intends to have the Viper stolen from Black.
Oh, no.
But this goes unresolved.
The court ruled. There was no evidence either way.
The synopsis just ends, this goes unresolved.
So that was the cliffhanger for the sequel.
Yeah, never got made. I'm sorry, Ben Fact, if you really like Test Drive Overdrive. But in fairness, like a lot of all these street racers had like really stupid plots. Like I really like Need for Speed Most Wanted. I think that's a generally very highly regarded, like almost like the peak of the street racer boom. But that game had the absolute stupidest story and was all FMVs. So definitely no game is innocent from this time period. No racing game is innocent of this stuff.
I think one of the greatest examples of that is Juiced, like their whole advertising campaign and how the game looked. It was just like so stupid in retrospective, and at the time people might have thought that was cool. One of the things this has actually brought into my head though as a potential topic for a future episode is what games have the most ridiculous back of the box blurbs, because when it comes to racing games there's so many like out there ones that are just ridiculous. Like this one for example.
Yeah, I think the early 2000s especially were very conducive to this type of stuff because of just everyone just trying to top everyone else. Like I remember Street Racing Syndicate definitely had like a hot import Knights babe on the cover, and as a kid seeing that, like I was still pretty young, like I wasn't like, I hadn't even hit puberty yet, so that wasn't anything that would interest me. Instead it just kind of like disgusted me, and I was like, ew, like it's weird.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that. Yeah, and I could have sworn did Juiced have some like controversy around it or something like that?
Yeah. I think there was like a commercial where a car drove by so quick it ripped a woman's clothes off or something. The type of controversy you'd expect from the era. I believe that was it. Yeah.
Yeah, I almost thought it was. Did you ever hear the weird story about? Now we're getting really off topic, but the BMX Triple X.
Oh yeah. I've heard of
I had thought for some reason it was something like that, but it actually was not as bad as BMX Triple X. But
yeah, I think that game takes the biscuit for the controversy. It's sorry to bring back to Test Drive again, but have a look at the image I've just posted in the Discord.
Alright, what is this? This is from the instruction booklet, and it's describing all of the characters, right?
Yeah, it is. Unfortunately it's in German, but look at that character design, man.
Donald Clark, yeah, I mean he definitely looks like a guy named Donald Clark. He drives the Concept Viper, which is just the Viper GTSR concept from 2001. That's really funny.
Oh man.
Skeeter Grimshaw is definitely the best name here.
Skeeter Grimshaw. Or Big T, driving his 2001 Corvette.
I like how none of the cars that these people drive have years next to them, except for Big T's Corvette, which they feel the need to tell you is from 2001.
Yeah. I also like how like everyone else's cars are at least a bit reasonable to own, but then Donald Clark's just like, here's a concept Viper that shouldn't be drivable in real life.
It's because he's Donald Clark. He runs the whole. He pulls the strings.
Yeah. There's no way he's the bad guy. It's his operation.
These are all like what I love too is like what was it from this time period that like every character in a racing game like this had to be some ridiculous stereotype. Like you got your white businessman, you got Lisa Lux, looks like she's probably like
it's just Charlize Theron.
Yeah, or like an adult star or something like that, or a model. Big T is just, probably this like, I mean, he's like this grossly overweight guy who they probably made Hispanic or something like that. Skeeter Grimshaw is, I don't know what the hell he is. Reese Weston is exactly the type of person you would expect would be driving a Camaro. And then the Jaguar, the guy in the Jaguar XJ is Nels von Stat, which is, he looks like he was from a German hair metal band.
Yeah, I think the description, I don't know German, but I think it says Dutch Playboy on the second line.
Ooh, yes.
So, there you go.
The horrible stereotypes in this game, and I mean, it was unavoidable. I guess really, it was a time where they felt like every racing game needed to have a story, and it just was so. I'm glad we've moved on to a point where, I mean, now racing games like barely ever get made, but when they do get made, we don't have to sit through this.
No, this is... You're right, it was so indicative of the era. For some reason, everybody was determined to crack that case of making a racing game with a good storyline. And I mean, you get attempts at R-Racing Evolution, and then you get stuff like this, and I'm not saying either of those are great. I just mean, like, there was this, like, weird pass-off between does circuit racing or street racing make for better stories? And then I think, ironically, Need for Speed probably had the best idea about it, where it was just a case of, you need to race these guys, here's some short 30-second videos introducing them, then just go play the game.
Gotta get through that blacklist.
Exactly.
These are all great topics that we could definitely spin out into, like, longer shows, but yeah, we should probably move on. I like this question a lot too. From RN the Andrian, favorite Japan-only racing games and favorite fictional team liveries. The Japan-only racing games question I like a lot because I know exactly what I'd answer, and that is Racing Lagoon. Have you ever played that?
I haven't actually. Give me a breakdown of that.
It is nuts. So Racing Lagoon is a street racing RPG made by Squaresoft. Only came out in Japan, was on the PS1. It was like a late generation PS1 game. And it's awesome. Like I've emulated it and I've played it, and unfortunately because it's an RPG and it's in Japanese, it's very tough to play, to experience at its fullest if you don't know the language, but it's kind of like it feels a lot like street racing games from the day. It doesn't do the whole like battle system thing that TXR does, the Tokyo Highway Battle, but you're kind of racing on those roads and stuff like that, and there are certain, you do encounter like certain other drivers, but there's like an overworld too. So like when you're actually like driving, it has an open world, but on top of that, it has this kind of like really cool like top down, like almost like when you're playing like Super Mario Brothers or something like that, and you're looking World 1-1, World 1-2, World 1-3, where you're like this miniature car and you're driving through the city at night trying to find other cars to race against. It's super, like, everyone always says, like, you talk about like Gran Turismo and Forza being car PGs, but this is definitely the closest to a true RPG that I've ever seen, like a racing game, and you upgrade your vehicles in the same way. It's very RPG style of progression, and the music's fantastic. It's just like, it's something I'm amazed like never was attempted again. I mean, I would have just settled if they ported that one, or not ported, if they localized it for the US, because I would have loved to play that game. But it's such a cool idea because it really just takes the whole street racing thing to like its like most JRPG level.
That actually sounds incredibly interesting, especially when we've just discussed some of the Western developers' attempts at trying to imprint something outside of racing in a racing game. This one sounds like it actually does it pretty well, especially if you're giving it such a glowing recommendation. I'm surprised it didn't even get considered to be ported over here.
Yeah, well, the other thing about it too, though, is that like it's not just the premise of the game. Like the handling is great. Like it's like the physics are excellent, and I'm really surprised because like Square is not a company that ever developed racing games. So how they were able to come up with a handling model that was like that, it's pretty not realistic at all, but just a lot of fun. And the game doesn't even have, as far as it does not have licensed cars. They don't license any of the vehicles. They're all Japanese, as you might expect, and they're all based on real cars. But there is this excellent video on YouTube of someone or a couple people streaming Racing Lagoon, and apparently what you can do once you get to a certain point in that game is you can race modify your cars, almost like you would in like Gran Turismo 1 or 2 or something like that. But in Racing Lagoon, the race modification, without fail, like almost always turns the car into a Group C version of itself. So you end up with these ridiculous, and the car list is all over the place. So you end up with like Mitsubishi Mirage Group C cars with like, long tails and shit like that. And like if you have like I think the Daihatsu Midget's in that game, and you can actually make a racing version of the Daihatsu Midget that's like mid-engine. It's totally wild. Some of the cars just end up looking like these Frankenstein abominations that like are just ridiculous, and some of them look great, but it's very strange. I have to find like a picture of one of the cars and send it to you as we're talking about this, because it's you've never seen anything like it.
It sounds incredible. Like, I'm actually a bit gutted that I haven't been able to play this.
Yeah, the stuff they do with the car list is just insane. But it's really cool, and it's easy enough to emulate. Because it's a PS1 game, so you're not really needing particularly powerful hardware to do it. But as I look this up, is there a Japan-only racing game comes to your mind?
I mean, this is a bit of an odd one, because when it comes to Japan-only racing games, I haven't had too much experience with them. But one of the ones that I actually really enjoyed playing, and it wasn't because of the racing, because it was pretty primitive, was, and I'm going to butcher this name here, Bakoso de Kotora Denistisu 2. That's my attempt at it.
I don't know what basically,
that is. So essentially, there's a craze in Japan at one point about decorating huge trucks with loads of crazy...
the Buzzu. Yeah. So okay, now I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that. So like on the PlayStation 1, there was a game where you could like choose a dump truck, a massive rig, whatever you wanted, and just decorate it to look absolutely mental. And that was the most fun part of the game. That's what I remember doing the most when I did play it back on the PlayStation 1, because the racing itself is it's not really a racing. It was like this weird lane change type of game. You probably know what I'm talking about from racing games way back, where essentially you just moved between lanes to keep the truck driving, but the actual act of creating the truck was the fun part. And the reason this is my choice is because it's pretty much my only exposure to a Japanese only racing game. Initially I was going to say Pepsi Man, but I didn't think it would qualify, but Pepsi Man always qualifies.
Maybe not. I mean, yeah, I know you're a big Pepsi Man fan. Well, how did you discover it?
Pepsi Man or this truck game?
No, not Pepsi Man, brother. Not Pepsi. Forget Pepsi Man.
How can we... I used to have a guy who would provide random PlayStation 1 games through not slightly legal methods. Basically just hand you like 20 discs of games, and this was one of them. That's basically it, and I was so confused at first because I had no clue what I was actually doing, and then once I got the hang of it, it was actually really fun. And for the PlayStation 1, it was actually fairly in-depth, so I would recommend having a look at it purely for how crazy it is. I just seen you posted that car in the group.
Yeah, so what I want you to do is click on that video. It should start at the right time. You should see a green hatchback. It looks like a Nissan hatchback or something like that for a time. And look at what happens to it.
Oh my god. That is incredible.
Yeah, so they've basically turned it into like this sort of like long, like they completely get rid of the fact that this is a hatchback. They move the engine to the middle. Yeah. They stretch it about like 4 feet, and they make it into a Le Mans racer. And they do this with all the cars. It gets really ridiculous. They do the exact same thing to an Alpine A110. Like it's nuts. And I know this
looks so fun.
This isn't great podcast fodder because you can't see it, but maybe we'll attach this link in the description of the episode, and you can go watch this video because you've never seen anything like it. Racing Lagoon is really cool. If there was some kind of like, probably be too hard to do, but if there was some kind of English patch, I'd be all over it, because it is really like, you know how like the initial D games are. You know, they're good. You know, they're mostly in the arcades. It's just like the mountain battle style. But like Initial D is this franchise and world with all of these characters and stuff. But you're not really immersed in that world. You're just kind of like racing as those characters, like as avatars. Like this to me seems like if you were to take, you know, a manga or an anime series like that, you fleshed it out into like a truly like this like all-encompassing environment, and all the lore was there, and there's a story, like open world. It's it's really an amazing concept. But also,
yeah, it is.
The music is also really good, and if you know Racing Lagoon, you know I've probably put a couple songs from the games in, or from the game in a couple episodes that we've had time extend.
It's a little Easter egg for those fans.
Yeah, just throwing that out there. It was around the time that I played the game and like discovered it and was like, this is so perfect. I need to give it some love. So like the soundtrack is like, it's like Ridge Racer 4-esque, like kind of like not quite as good, but definitely along those same lines, and just the whole like aesthetic of the game, and the fact that it was like a late, like I think it came out in 98 or 1999, so like it's a late PS1 release, and around the same time as you know, R4 and Wipeout 3 and all those games that were really like taking such amazing advantage of the hardware. So
in this game, I've just had a look at the Wikipedia page and listened to this for Edgy. The game's story follows a new member of a street racing team in Yokohama, Japan, as he tries to learn about his forgotten past and a mysterious race that took place 10 years prior to the game's opening.
Here's the thing though, that sounds awesome. Like that, I'm all about that. I'm not, you know, this isn't Donald Black, so
no, that's true.
Yeah, I want to learn all about the 5-member team led by the ace Iki Fujisawa.
I just want to see this made into an anime now, to be honest.
Oh, it's awesome. I mean, jazz techno fusion soundtrack. I just wonder, like, why it just like never made it out of Japan, because it just seemed like it. I mean, Racing Lagoon's a weird name. When I don't know how I even found out this game existed, but when I did, I was like, what the hell's a Racing Lagoon? But honestly, within just like, that's the thing, is like, unfortunately we can't, you know, we can't really get all the enjoyment out of the story and whatnot. It's hard to play because of the language barrier, but like if you just do the single races, like they're pretty fun because, you know, the game is structurally, physically sound as well. So definitely give it a shot if a 1999 PlayStation street racing game has any interest for you.
That's just Time Extend all over.
Pretty much, yeah. And we're getting kind of long in the show, so I have a couple more questions, but don't want to spend too much time on this. But favorite fictional team liveries? I mean, Pack Racing Club. It's got to be. That's who we are now.
Yeah, exactly. That question falls perfectly into this image being released. So, yeah, I would say PRC is right up there, and then individually for me, I've always loved and you will disagree here, of course, the Raven West decals.
Oh, Raven West.
The lads.
It just doesn't really mean anything for me. It's just like they spend the whole game trying to make you hate that team because they're always good, and it's just like, I don't care. It's just like you guys drive a boring black car or gray car around.
Hey, I'll have you know they have stripes on that.
Oh, the stripes. I forget about the stripes.
And Nathan McCain, of course, being the top driver for Raven West, who's a total arsehole. I'm surprised you don't remember him.
Nathan McCain. Yeah, I don't remember him at all. I to be honest, do you ever like, does he ever come up in the story, or do you just hate him because he's always at the top of the leaderboard?
A bit of both. He's always at the top, but whenever he did the 1v1 races, he would purposely try and crash you out.
Oh, okay. Wow, what a jerk. I mean, they're coming back in the new grid, right? Raven West is returning?
Yeah, they are. I don't know what it is about this.
Well, you suddenly don't sound happy about Raven West anymore.
No, I mean, I'm happy they're coming back. I just mean in general, this new grid game, I don't know, it's leaving me a wee bit cold for some reason.
It's an interesting one.
Yeah, something we'll discuss when it actually comes out, of course. Don't want to say anything yet until I actually play it, but I don't know, there's just something that seems to be... I really can't put my finger on it. I think it's just when it was announced as a reboot that like already kind of hindered my expectations, because that almost feels like a crutch to rely on should the game not excel in certain areas that the previous ones did.
I just think the concept of a reboot in a racing game franchise is like, what is that? Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Grid 3 was not good. Did Grid 2 have any relationship to Grid 1 in terms of, like, was Raven West even in Grid 2? Like...
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, so I was like, they could have just called this Grid 3, and that would have been fine, but instead they've... I mean, Grid 1 definitely has, like, you know, a lot of... I think it's the one that more people play, and so,
yeah.
Whatever. We'll talk about that later. I should say, you know, Pfizer's livery obviously is great. We're both big Pfizer fans. And you know, somebody responded to when we put our banner up, and you know, it was a PRC livery, and they're like, "What? No love for Racing Team Solvaloo?" And I will say, so you know, Solvaloo was the team that I always like drove as when I was playing Ridge Racer 4 back in the day. Yeah, it's good. I mean, the livery is very simple. It's just like gray with blue stripes. So like I do like that team a lot, but like to me it's not like the best designed. I think that's why we chose PRC too, because we wanted something that was a little bit more colorful and like not the car that everyone has seen on the cover of the R4 box. Like the PRC car is still there, but like it's like in second place. It's in the background. So
yeah, exactly. If anything, time extends about giving shout outs to those lesser things. So
right.
PRC gets top billing.
That's what we're about. Alright, last question got here from Tor Eric Milkevic. Sorry if I butchered your name, I tend to do that with everyone. Do you use Gran Turismo as a car shopping guide only to realize that all the cool, cheap K cars actually aren't for sale in your reason? I definitely use it as a car shopping guide, I always have, and I tell other people to. Yeah, I mean, K cars are literally like the furthest thing from something you can buy in the U.S. Brendan, you might have better luck, but I mean, frankly, most of those K cars never make it out of Japan.
Yeah, we get the boring shit ones.
Do you get Daihatsus? They sell Daihatsus in the UK, right?
I mean, they did at one point for a little while, but they were never anywhere near as prevalent to say that if you wanted one you could go out and buy them. So I suppose that should be a really interesting topic to do a bit of research on, because I do remember seeing some Daihatsus, but it wasn't as if whenever I was at a car dealership or whatever I would see them for sale outside of the horrific hatchback ones that would get sold. Can't even remember the model name.
Yeah, I mean,
so some key cars were here, but nothing exciting.
I've never seen a K car in the flesh, I don't think. When I went to the New York Auto Show, they had like the World Cars of the Year in like the basement. Like I guess whoever makes that decision of what the best car of the year is around the world. There was a Suzuki Jimny down there, which is not a K car. It's bigger than that, but it's also smaller than like a Jeep Renegade probably. So, I mean, I thought that was pretty cool. And they do not sell the Jimny in the U.S., which is a shame because that car is awesome. It's like,
yeah,
I mean, it's literally a box with like a lawnmower engine that can go off road and costs like $8,000. So I'm all about that.
I love how the design stayed basically the same as well throughout all the years. They gave it a slight facelift, but in the most part it still holds that Jimny design, which is a commitment to how good it looks.
Yeah, I mean, why change it, right? There's no reason to change it. I mean, the coolest K car ever has got to be the AutoZam AZ1, right?
Yes, for sure.
So weird. Just like a tiny Ferrari with gull-wing doors, like. It's like yeah. I don't think that culture will ever be better than like mid 90s or early 90s like Japan. Like what they were pumping out of that, like car wise at least, was just like that was the peak. I don't think we'll ever see anything like that again.
No, every photo you look at of the AZ1, it looks amazing. Like there's not many cars I would say that's the case, but oh man, what a nice car.
First time I ever drove the AZ1 was in Sega GT, because it was in Sega GT, and I was like, this thing is weird. And the other thing about Sega GT is, you know, we had a whole episode about it, I almost forgot, is that it's horrible and all the cars are undrivable, but the K cars are easy to drive because they're like 40 horsepower and front wheel drive. So
yeah, that's the only one you can actually reliably have a go at.
Right.
Well, apparently Jay Leno's got an AZ1 as well. Imagine Jay Leno in that car.
So is this? So you just sent me a picture of an AZ1 in between. I love this because it's definitely done in the U.S. because it's sitting in between a Chevy Silverado and a Ford F-250, and it is the smallest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's
the AZ1 could probably fit in the bed of those trucks.
Yeah,
I would think.
I mean, it's possible.
I just love it. It has 2 seats. How are 2 people going to fit inside that thing? It's impossible. When I got my Fiesta, everyone in my family made fun of me because they're like, well, I guess you can't drive us anywhere anymore. Like, people in my family aren't, like, fat or overweight. They're just, like, average-sized people. So I can only imagine, yeah. If you have an AZ1, you can't have many friends, I guess.
I would love to have an AZ1 with, like, 1 seat in the front. In the middle, like the McLaren F1. Can you imagine how cool that would be?
That'd be great. I mean, you'd basically be sitting in a go-kart at that point. A go-kart with a Ferrari shell. And that's a pretty cool premise. I can get behind that.
Yeah, this is definitely one of the coolest cars ever, I would say.
Well, that's those are all the questions we were asked, and it's been about an hour, so we should probably put a cap on the show.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't expect all the questions to last an hour, but we seem to always say this when we've got like one topic to go into conversation with.
We can stretch anything out. We can stretch anything out into an hour. Apparently, it's not very difficult for us. I mean, I mostly blame Test Drive Brotherhood of Men or whatever the hell it was called. I can't remember.
See, that's the beauty of it. Who would have thought that game of everything would be like the most prominent conversation? So. Thank you for that question.
Only on Time Extend. Yes, thank you so much. I mean, I may play it after all.
That's why it's a 7 out of 10 racer. We've just proven the concept for that show.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for listening again, and yeah, I don't know what we're doing next time, but maybe we'll be Test Drive Overdrive. We'll see.
Yeah. Thanks very much, guys. We'll catch you in the next episode.
Later.